The scream from the Duke's nursery wasn't pain, it was wonder. 8-year-old Paul Marson, blind since age 2, was staring at his nanny's face for the first time. In her trembling hands, thin membranes she'd just removed from his eyes, something Europe's finest physicians never saw. But Paul's blindness was no accident. It was attempted murder. And the black American servant kneeling before the Duke had just destroyed someone's very expensive, very deadly scheme.
Hello everyone! Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, like the video and share with loved ones, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin.
Oldville Estate, Yorkshire, England, November 1887. The grand manor sat like a tomb on the moors, its windows perpetually shuttered, curtains drawn against light that served no purpose for the blind air within. Duke Thomas Marson, 38 and prematurely gray, stood in his study reviewing dismissal papers for the 16th nanny in 6 years. Each had quit within months, unable to handle young Master Paul's difficulties. The constant crying, the violent tantrums born from frustration, the darkness he lived in that no physician could cure. 8 years. 8 years since his son's eyes had clouded over at age 2. Thomas had spent his fortune consulting Europe's finest specialists, Vienna, Paris, London, Edinburgh. Every diagnosis the same: congenital blindness, incurable, progressive. The Marson heir would never see his inheritance, never function as a proper duke. The family line, 6 centuries old, would end with a blind child the aristocracy whispered about in pitying tones. Thomas's debts had mounted catastrophically. His business manager, Connie Jameson, held notes totaling 80,000, more than the estate generated in 3 years. Without a functional heir, Thomas knew his desperation made him vulnerable. But what choice did he have? Meanwhile, across the Atlantic in Boston, Georgina Walton packed her single trunk with everything she owned. At 32, she was leaving America for England, hired through an employment agency desperate enough to send a black woman to serve English nobility. She'd worked as a domestic servant for 12 years since her mother died, saving every penny. But the real reason she was leaving haunted her. Her younger sister Clara had died 2 years ago from a treatable infection. The Boston physician had refused to examine her properly, dismissing her symptoms as exaggeration common to her kind. Georgina had watched Clara die slowly, knowing that with proper care she could have lived. The rage and helplessness of that memory never left her. The agency letter had been blunt. Duke seeks nanny for difficult blind child. Previous 16 employees terminated. Position requires patience, discretion, and resignation to likely failure. Room, board, 30,000 annually. Georgina didn't care about the warnings. She needed to leave Boston's ghost behind. And she'd learned from her mother, a midwife who'd delivered half the black babies in their neighborhood, that sometimes healing required courage, not credentials. She boarded the steamship to Liverpool with one conviction: every person, regardless of station or circumstance, deserved to be truly seen, truly cared for. If this blind Duke's son had been failed by expensive specialists, perhaps he simply needed someone who'd actually look. 3 weeks later, Georgina arrived at Oldville Estate in a hired cart, rain hammering the Yorkshire moors. The butler, Frank Scheidner, greeted her with barely concealed skepticism. His grace employs you out of desperation, not preference. The young master is difficult. Do not exceed your station or question medical authority. Is that clear? Georgina met his gaze steadily. Perfectly clear, sir. But as she climbed the stairs toward the nursery, where 8-year-old Paul Marson lived in perpetual darkness, she made a silent promise. She would see this child, truly see him, even if no one else had. Georgina entered the nursery to find it shrouded in darkness. Heavy velvet curtains blocked every window. The air was stale, oppressive. In the corner, a small figure sat motionless on the floor, head down, arms wrapped around his knees. "Master Paul?" Georgina spoke softly, kneeling several feet away. "My name is Georgina Walton. I'm your new nanny." No response. The boy didn't even lift his head. She didn't approach. Instead, she settled on the floor where she was and began speaking about the journey from America, the storm on the Atlantic, the sheep she'd seen on the Yorkshire moors. Her voice was steady, warm, expecting nothing. After 20 minutes, Paul finally spoke. "You're different. You don't sound like the others. I'm from Boston. Different place, different voice. The others always tried to touch me right away, to lead me places. I hate being grabbed. Then I won't grab you. When you're ready to trust me, you'll let me know." For 3 days, Georgina simply sat with him, talking, singing spirituals her mother had taught her, describing colors and light Paul couldn't see. She learned to communicate through touch signing, simple taps and patterns on his palm that answered yes, no, happy, sad, hungry, tired. On the fourth day, Paul reached for her hand. "Will you read to me?" "Of course, sweetheart." She read for hours, adventure stories, poetry, anything that brought the world into his darkness. And she noticed things the previous 16 nannies hadn't bothered to see. Paul constantly rubbed his eyes, sometimes until tears streamed down his face. When she asked through touch signing, he tapped his response. "Itches, always itches." "How long has it itched?" He hesitated, then tapped. "Always, since I was very small." Georgina's instincts flared. An itch wasn't blindness, it was irritation, something external causing discomfort. 1 week into her employment, she asked Frank for Paul's medical records. He refused curtly. "His Grace's physician handles all medical matters. You're here to provide basic care, nothing more." But that night, after the household slept, Georgina lit an oil lamp and brought it to Paul's bedside. "Sweetheart, I need to look at your eyes closely. Will you let me?" Paul trusted her now. He nodded. She lifted the lamp, gently raising his eyelids. What she saw made her breath catch. Covering each pupil was a thin, translucent membrane, milky white with tiny veins like spiderwebs. Not natural tissue, not congenital damage. Something growing there, something that didn't belong. Her heart pounded. This wasn't permanent blindness. This was removable. Every physician had examined Paul in darkness to avoid distressing him with unnecessary light. No one had truly looked. Georgina thought of Clara dying because a doctor wouldn't examine her properly. She remembered her mother's words. Sometimes healing requires courage, not credentials. She made her decision. "Paul, baby, I think I can help you see, but you have to trust me completely. Can you do that?" Paul's hand found hers in the darkness. He squeezed once. Yes. Georgina prepared carefully. She retrieved lamp oil from the kitchen, clean cloths from the linen cupboard, and steadied her trembling hands with prayer. Back in the nursery, Paul sat on his bed, small and trusting. "What are you going to do, Nanny Walton?" "I'm going to try to remove something covering your eyes. It might feel strange, but I won't hurt you. I promise." She dipped her fingers in warm lamp oil, positioned the light close, and whispered, "Jesus, guide my hands." Gently, she touched the membrane covering Paul's right eye. It was slick, adhesive, but the oil loosened it. She worked carefully, peeling it away from the pupil like wet paper separating from glass. Paul gasped, his body going rigid. "Stay still, sweetheart. Almost done." The membrane lifted completely. She dropped it into a bowl, a thin, translucent thing that had stolen 8 years of sight. She moved to the second eye, working with the same careful precision. When it came free, Paul blinked rapidly, tears streaming down his face. Then he went completely still. His eyes, now clear, focused on the lamplight, on Georgina's face. "Nanny Walton?" His voice was barely audible. "I see light. There's light." "Yes, baby, there's light. And you're..." His small hand reached toward her face, touching her cheek with wonder. "You're beautiful." Georgina's sob broke the silence as she pulled him close. For the first time in his memory, Paul Marson saw the world. Morning brought chaos. A maid entered to wake Paul and screamed. The boy was standing at the window, staring out at the Yorkshire moors with wide, seeing eyes. Frank Scheidner rushed in, saw the bowl with strange membranes, saw Paul tracking movement with clear vision, and went pale. "What have you done?" He sent for Duke Thomas immediately. Thomas arrived in his dressing gown, face thunderous. "Explain yourself." Georgina stood between him and Paul. "Your Grace, I examined your son's eyes properly and found growths covering his pupils. I removed them. He can see now. You performed medical procedures on the Marson heir. A servant?" His voice was dangerously low. "I did what needed doing. Look at him, Your Grace." Thomas's gaze shifted to Paul, who stared at his father with tears streaming. "Father?" Paul's voice trembled. "You have gray in your hair, and your eyes are blue, like the sky Nanny Walton described." Thomas froze. His son, his heir, just described his face. Something impossible unless... "Paul, can you truly see me?" Paul nodded vigorously. "Yes, I can see everything. The curtains are red. The walls are white. There's a painting of horses." Thomas dropped to his knees, pulling Paul into his arms, his body shaking with sobs. "My boy, my son, my heir." But relief transformed quickly to rage. He turned on Georgina. "You had no right. What if you damaged his eyes permanently?" "With respect, Your Grace, 16 physicians declared him incurably blind without ever examining him properly. I looked. I saw something removable. I removed it. You're a nanny, not a physician. And yet, Your Grace, young Master Paul can see." The simplicity of it silenced him. Then heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. Dr. Bill Talbot had arrived. Want to know what happens when the family physician discovers his deadly secret has been exposed? Subscribe now, because what Georgina uncovers next will reveal a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of power, and her courage will be tested like never before. Dr. Bill Talbot entered the nursery with his black medical bag, his professional mask of concern firmly in place. But when he saw Paul Marson looking directly at him, tracking his movement with clear, focused eyes, all color drained from his face. "This is impossible," he whispered. Thomas grabbed Talbot's arm, emotion flooding his voice. "Bill, the nanny removed growths from Paul's eyes. Growths you never mentioned in 8 years. My son can see." Talbot's expression shifted rapidly. Shock, fear, calculation. He recovered quickly, his voice taking on clinical authority. "Growths? What absolute nonsense. The young master has congenital blindness." Whatever this woman did was reckless and dangerous. He moved toward Paul with a bottle from his bag. "The sight is likely temporary, possibly hallucinatory. We must apply medicinal drops immediately before permanent damage occurs." Georgina stepped between them. "No." Talbot's face flushed red. "Excuse me? I said no, you're not putting anything in his eyes." "Your Grace," Talbot appealed to Thomas, indignation rising. "This servant is interfering with medical treatment of the Marson heir. She must be removed immediately and charged with assault." But Georgina stood firm, her voice steady. "Show us the bottle, doctor. Show His Grace what you want to put it in his son's eyes." Talbot clutched it protectively against his chest. "This is specialized medicine. You wouldn't understand the complexities." "Then explain it. In front of the Duke. What exactly is in that bottle?" Talbot's jaw tightened. "This is absurd. I've treated the Marson family for 15 years. My credentials are beyond question." "And the heir's been blind for 8 of those years," Georgina interrupted. "Strange how you never once mentioned removable growths. Strange how you always examined him in darkness. Strange how those permanent congenital defects just peeled away like wet paper." Thomas's expression changed, doubt creeping into his eyes. "Bill, why didn't you see what she saw?" Talbot's composure began fracturing. "Your Grace, surely you're not believing a colonial servant over your own physician? The Marson line depends on proper medical care from qualified professionals. Answer the question, Bill. In 8 years, 16 examinations. Why didn't you see those membranes?" "Because," Talbot stopped himself, breathing hard, "because they weren't there. She's clearly fabricated this entire situation to appear heroic, to secure her position. They're right there." Georgina pointed to the bowl on the nightstand. 2 membranes, still wet. His Grace can examine them himself. Thomas crossed to the bowl, lifting one translucent membrane into the light. It was undeniably real, undeniably foreign. "What is this, Bill?" Talbot backed toward the door. "I don't know. I've never seen such a thing. Perhaps some rare complication that developed recently." "Master Paul said his eyes have itched since he was very small," Georgina said quietly. "Since you first started treating him. Since those specialized drops you prescribed when he was 2 years old." Talbot went absolutely still. Thomas's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. "What were in those drops, Bill?" "Your Grace, I must protest this interrogation." "What were in those drops?" Talbot's hand was on the doorknob now, panic visible in his eyes. "I'll return when you've regained your senses and dismiss this charlatan." He fled. Thomas stared at the closed door, then at the membrane in his hand, then at his son, who could miraculously see. "Get me the medicine records. Every prescription Talbot ever wrote for Paul. Now." That night, while Thomas met with his solicitor reviewing medical records, Georgina couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Talbot's panic, his desperate attempt to apply more drops, his refusal to explain what they contained. She slipped down to the kitchen, where cook, Miss Beatrice, was preparing tomorrow's bread. "Mrs. Beatrice, you know herbs and medicines. Can you tell me what this is?" She placed the bottle Talbot had dropped in his hasty retreat on the wooden table. Cook wiped flour from her hands, uncorked it carefully, and sniffed. Her face went rigid. "Lord have mercy. That's got arsenic in it. Not much, but enough to cause terrible damage over time. Where'd you get this?" "Dr. Talbot." He wanted to put it in Master Paul's eyes. Cook's hand flew to her mouth. "That devil's been poisoning the Marson air." Georgina's blood ran cold as pieces clicked together. Not to kill, to blind. Those membranes weren't natural. They were caused by something applied when he was small. She remembered Paul's touch signs describing how his eyes hurt and burned when he was very little, how the doctor gave him special drops that stung. Why would a physician deliberately blind a child? Cook's expression darkened. "Money, girl. It's always money with men like that." Georgina needed to know more. The next morning, she overheard raised voices from Thomas's study. She pressed her ear to the heavy oak door. "You owe me 80,000 pounds, Thomas." A man's voice, sharp, angry. She recognized it. Connie Jameson, the estate manager she'd seen visiting weekly. "When you die without a proper heir, Oldville becomes mine per our contract. But if the boy can suddenly see, if he can function as the true Marson heir and inherit," Thomas's voice was deadly quiet, "you wanted my son blind. You and Talbot conspired to destroy the Marson line. Proof? You have no proof. A servant's wild theories mean nothing in court. I have the medicine bottle. I'm having it analyzed in London by independent chemists." Jameson laughed coldly. "Then you'll find I had nothing to do with any medicine. That's all Talbot's doing. I'm merely a businessman protecting his investments. Your signature is on those debt contracts, Thomas. Legal and binding. If you die heirless, Oldville is mine. Get out of my house. With pleasure. But mark my words, that black wench will hang for practicing medicine without license on nobility. I'll see to it, personally. And when she's gone, when you're desperate again, we'll revisit our arrangement. If you touch her, I'll destroy you. You? You're a broken duke with no fortune and crushing debts. You have no power here." Footsteps approached the door. Georgina fled down the corridor, heart pounding. Everything made terrible sense now. Jameson held Thomas's debts. With Paul blind and unable to function as heir, Thomas would eventually die, desperate and defeated. The estate would default to Jameson. But a healthy, seeing Marson heir changed everything. They'd tried to murder Paul's future, slowly, carefully, medically, to steal his inheritance. That evening, Thomas found Georgina in the nursery where Paul slept peacefully, seeing even in his dreams now. "You overheard," Thomas said quietly. "Yes, Your Grace. They tried to destroy my son, my line. Everything. And they almost succeeded." Thomas's voice broke. What do I do? Jameson's right. I have no proof of his involvement. Just the medicine and Talbot's panic. Georgina met his gaze. Then we get proof, and we make sure they both pay. For 2 weeks, Thomas and Georgina worked in secret. She searched the nursery methodically, finding every medicine bottle Talbot had prescribed over the years, 17 in total, all containing trace amounts of arsenic, confirmed by London chemists. Thomas hired private investigators who uncovered the financial connection. Talbot had received payments of $500 annually from Jameson's accounts, recorded as consulting fees, but with no legitimate services rendered. More damning, letters between Talbot and Jameson found in Talbot's office after Thomas obtained a magistrate's warrant. One read, "The boy's condition progresses as planned. Another year of treatments and the damage will be irreversible. Ensure the Duke remains desperate." But Jameson had been careful. His letters never explicitly mentioned poisoning, only referenced the arrangement and securing the investment. "It's not enough," Thomas said one evening, spreading documents across his desk. "A competent barrister will argue Talbot acted alone, that Jameson knew nothing of the medical details." Georgina studied the papers, thinking, what if we make Jameson reveal himself? How? Host a gathering, county magistrate, local gentry, business associates. Announce Paul's miraculous recovery and your intention to investigate who caused his blindness. Watch how Jameson reacts. Thomas considered this. He'll be careful, controlled. Maybe. Or maybe his greed will make him bold. Men who think they've won often speak too freely. Paul entered the study, now moving confidently through spaces he'd memorized in darkness but could finally see. "Father, Nanny Walton, why do you look so serious?" Thomas pulled his son close. "We're making sure bad people face justice, that's all." "The doctor who hurt me?" "Yes, and the man who paid him to do it." Paul's young face hardened with understanding beyond his years. "I want to help. It's my eyes they tried to steal." Georgina knelt before him. "You've already helped, sweetheart. You trusted me when no one else would have. That's the bravest thing anyone's done." 3 days later, Thomas sent invitations throughout Yorkshire. "The Duke of Oldville requests your presence to witness a matter of justice regarding his heir." The gathering would take place in 1 week. Talbot, learning of the summons, attempted to flee to Scotland. Thomas's investigators apprehended him at the border. He was brought back to York Jail, awaiting formal charges. With Talbot captured and terrified, Georgina suggested one final strategy. "Let me visit him, woman to woman, servant to servant. Let me make him think I'm offering him a way out if he confesses who hired him." Thomas hesitated. "It's dangerous. If Jameson learns you're involved, he already wants me hanged. What's more dangerous than that?" She visited Talbot in his cell the next morning, playing her role perfectly, a frightened servant worried about her own neck. "Doctor, they're going to hang us both, but if you tell them who paid you, maybe they'll show mercy." Talbot, broken and desperate, wept. It was Jameson's idea, all of it. He said a blind heir meant the estate would eventually be his. "I just did what I was paid to do. I'm not a murderer. I'm just a man who poisoned a child for money," Georgina finished coldly. Her sympathy evaporated. "I have what I need." She left him sobbing. The confession, witnessed by 2 guards and transcribed by a court clerk, was legal and binding. Now they had everything. The confrontation is coming. And what happens when Georgina faces down the man who tried to destroy the Marson line will leave you speechless. Subscribe now because justice is about to be served in the most unexpected way, and you won't want to miss a single moment. 1 week later, Oldville's Grand Hall filled with Yorkshire's most prominent citizens. The county magistrate, Sir Edmund Hartley, sat at the head table. Local gentry, business associates, and curious nobility packed the room, drawn by rumors of scandal involving the Marson heir. Commie Jameson arrived confident, impeccably dressed, believing he was there to witness Georgina's arrest for unlicensed medical practice on nobility. Thomas stood, his voice carrying the authority of 6 centuries of Marson lineage. "Gentlemen, ladies, you're here to witness justice. For 8 years, I believed my son incurably blind. I spent my fortune seeking cures that didn't exist. But Paul's blindness was no act of God. It was attempted murder of the Marson line. Gasps rippled through the room. Jameson's expression remained carefully neutral, but his hands tightened on his chair arms. Thomas continued, "My son's eyes were deliberately poisoned with arsenic beginning when he was 2 years old. Applied by my trusted physician, Dr. Bill Talbot, causing membrane growth and progressive blindness." He held up the evidence: 17 medicine bottles, chemical analysis reports, payment records. Talbot has confessed he was paid £500 annually by Mr. Kami Jameson to ensure the Marson heir remained blind and unable to inherit. The room erupted. Jameson shot to his feet. "Lies! Talbot's a desperate man facing the gallows. He'd say anything." "Woody," Thomas produced the letters. "Your letters, Kami. The boy's condition progresses as planned. Ensure the Duke remains desperate." "Your own words." Jameson's face flushed red. "Business correspondence taken out of context. I knew nothing about medical treatments." Georgina stood from the back of the room. Every head turned. "You knew everything, Mr. Jameson. 3 weeks ago, you told His Grace that Dr. Talbot handled all the medicine. You knew about the drops. You knew what they were for." Jameson's eyes blazed with fury. The word of a black servant against a respected businessman? This is absurd. Sir Edmund Hartley spoke for the first time, his voice grave. The word of the woman who saved the Marson heir's life and uncovered a conspiracy to destroy one of England's oldest noble lines. I've reviewed the evidence, Mr. Jameson. It's damning. She practiced medicine without license. She should be arrested. Thomas stepped forward. She saved my son when every credentialed physician failed. She removed simple growths your paid doctor deliberately created and maintained. If that's a crime, then we've lost all sense of justice. Paul stood beside his father, his clear eyes meeting Jameson's. You tried to steal my sight, my inheritance, my future. Why? Jameson's control finally snapped. Because your father is weak. He deserved to lose everything. That estate should have been mine. I earned it managing his disasters while he wallowed in self-pity over a blind brat who was better off. He stopped, realizing what he had admitted. Sir Edmund's voice was ice. Mr. Kami Jameson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to defraud, and attempted theft of a noble estate. Dr. Bill Talbot will be charged as your accomplice. Guards seized Jameson. He struggled, screaming threats. This isn't over. I'll destroy you all. But his voice faded as they dragged him from the hall. The room sat in stunned silence. Then slowly, beginning with Sir Edmund, they stood and applauded. Not for the scandal, but for justice finally served. Thomas found Georgina's eyes across the room and nodded once. She'd saved more than his son's sight. She'd saved the Marson legacy itself. 3 weeks after Jameson and Talbot's arrest, Thomas summoned Georgina to his study. She entered nervously, still uncertain of her position now that the crisis had passed. Your Grace, you wanted to see me? Thomas stood by the window, watching Paul run through the gardens, finally able to see the estate that would one day be his. Miss Walton, I've been thinking about what I owe you. You owe me nothing, Your Grace. I only did what was right. You saved my son's sight. You exposed men who nearly destroyed the Marson line, and you did it with nothing but courage and a good heart. He turned to face her. That deserves more than gratitude. He gestured to a chair. Sit, please. Georgina sat, confused. Oldville needs a new household manager, someone trustworthy, someone who sees clearly in more ways than one. I want you to oversee the estate household and Paul's continued education. The position comes with a salary of £200 annually, private quarters, and full authority over domestic affairs. Georgina's breath caught. Your Grace, I'm just a nanny. You're the woman who saved the Marson heir when all of Europe's physicians failed. You're the person Paul trusts most in this world. And frankly, you're the only one whose judgment I trust anymore. He paused, then continued with obvious emotion. There's more. English law won't recognize you as Paul's mother, but I can make you his legal guardian. If anything happens to me before Paul reaches majority, you'll have authority over his care and the Marson inheritance." Tears streamed down Georgina's face. "Your Grace, I don't know what to say." "Say yes, stay with us. Let me do one thing right in repaying the debt the Marson family owes you." His voice softened. "You'll be family, Miss Walton. Truly family." She nodded, unable to speak. Thomas smiled genuinely, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "Good. Now Paul's been asking if you'll teach him to paint. Apparently the future Duke has 8 years of seeing to catch up on." 6 months later, Oldville had transformed completely. Curtains thrown open, light flooding every room. Paul, now 9, carried a sketchbook everywhere, obsessed with capturing colors and shapes he'd never seen. Georgina established a small school for tenant children, teaching reading and basic medical observation, scandalous to some, celebrated by others. One afternoon, Paul completed his first real painting, Oldville Estate at sunset, golden light spilling across the moors. He presented it to Thomas and Georgina together. "It's for both of you. Nanny Walton gave me eyes, Father gave me a home to see, and one day when I'm Duke, I'll make sure everyone remembers what she did." Thomas's voice was thick with emotion. "It's beautiful, son." Georgina studied the painting, proof that courage could transform darkness into light. That worth wasn't determined by birth or credentials, but by the willingness to act when others looked away. "You know what this means?" Thomas said quietly to Georgina. "You've changed everything. Not just Paul's life, but what the Marson name stands for." "We changed it together," Georgina replied. "That was always the point." That evening, the three of them, an unconventional family by any measure, walked the estate grounds together. Paul ran ahead, calling back descriptions of everything he saw. Thomas walked beside Georgina in comfortable silence. Finally, he said, "I was a fool to trust blindly in titles and credentials over simple human decency. Sometimes the most important things are invisible to those who don't care to look." Indeed they are. 1 year later, Paul Marson's case had become famous throughout England. Noble families with incurably blind children wrote to Oldville, begging Georgina to examine them. She discovered 7 more cases of deliberate poisoning, 3 of natural growth similar to Paul's, and countless instances of physician negligence. Thomas established the Oldville Institute for Medical Integrity, investigating physician fraud, funding genuine research, and training practical observers regardless of class or race. Georgina became its director, creating a network of women who saved lives through careful observation and common sense. The Institute became her life's work. Paul grew into a healthy young man who never forgot the darkness or the woman who freed him from it. On the anniversary of his healing, Thomas hosted a celebration. County families attended, even those who'd initially condemned him for elevating a black servant to guardian of the Marson heir. But they'd witnessed Paul's transformation and the Institute's success. Prejudice yielded, slowly, to undeniable results. Paul, now 10, made a speech to the assembled guests. "A year ago, I lived in darkness, not because God made me blind, but because evil men chose to hurt me for money. One woman had the courage to look when others wouldn't, and the skill to help when others couldn't." His clear eyes found Georgina. She didn't have fancy titles or credentials. She just had a good heart and steady hands. "Nanny Walton taught me that worth isn't about where you're born or what you look like. It's about what you do when someone needs help." The room erupted in applause. Thomas raised his glass. "To Georgina Walton, who proved that nobility is action, not birthright, and to a future where the Marson name stands for justice, not just privilege." Later, Georgina stepped outside into the garden. Paul found her looking up at the stars. "Are you happy, Nanny Walton?" She pulled him close. "Happier than I ever imagined possible, sweetheart. Do you think Aunt Clara would be proud that you saved me like nobody saved her?" Georgina's eyes filled with tears. "I think she's watching right now, and yes, I think she's very proud." They stood together in comfortable silence, looking up at the night sky, a sky the future Duke could see because one woman refused to accept that darkness was permanent. Inside, Thomas watched them through the window. The Black American nanny and the English Duke's heir. An impossible family that had saved each other in ways neither could have predicted. The Marson line would continue, not just through bloodline, but through the legacy of courage Georgina had shown, that sometimes healing comes from the most unexpected places, that true nobility lies not in titles but in the willingness to see what others miss, and to act when everyone else looks away. Behind them, Oldville Estate blazed with light. No more drawn curtains, no more darkness, no more hiding. Only truth, only family, only love. This is what real courage looks like. One woman standing against corruption, healing where credentials failed, and proving that worth isn't about bloodline, but about character. If stories of extraordinary bravery from ordinary people inspire you, subscribe now, because history is full of unsung heroes who change lives simply by refusing to look away, and their stories deserve to be told.
If you enjoyed this story, we appreciate you a whole lot and look forward to connecting with you as we build a community on this channel. Every day, we will put out more stories, so we need your support. Help us by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. You won't miss any new exciting videos. Check out the next video. You'll love it!